guys in the dark.
My name is Kathy Kleiner. Every now and then I like to duck into a bookstore with my husband, Scott, and head straight for the true crime section. I'll scan the shelves until I spot it. It's a book on the serial killer, Ted Bundy. The stranger beside me, maybe, or perhaps the only living witness. Whatever it is, I've most likely probably read it already. But I grab it off the shelf anyways, and I flip through it until I find my name. Then I'll look directly at my husband, and I'll grin. "Now you find a book with your name in it," I'll say with a chuckle. You wouldn't know it by watching me joke around, that I would be holding a book about the man who had almost killed me. I was 20 when Ted Bundy had crept into my bedroom at Florida State University. I was 22 when he was sentenced to death, and 32 when he was finally strapped into the old Sparky, Florida's electric chair. As the years had went on, I would have tried to forget him. But instead, I just wanted to figure him out, which is why I usually am so comfortable in the true crime section of any kind of bookstore. There are so many books about him that I've been able to dedicate an entire section of my library to them, and books are just the tip of the Bundy iceberg. This Bundy binge, as the killer's defense lawyer has called it, comes in the forms of movies, documentaries, Oxygen Channel specials, t-shirts, greeting cards, Tumblr fan accounts, and everything else. Much of the Bundy content declares somberly that Bundy was horrible, but yet there's an undeniable, flattering undertone to some of it, given that Bundy's good looks and superficial boy-next-door charms have become a core part of his legend. The year that he was arrested, the New York Times had called him Kennedy-esque. Even at one point, in 2018, I had signed up for Twitter, and a Ted Bundy fan account had responded to my first tweet, saying, "Oh, there you are, Kathy." I really don't mind any of that, nor the movies, or the t-shirts. In a way, I'm glad that people are still talking about the man who had tried to kill me. He was living, and breathing, and he did what he did. And at some point, he was possibly even a real person. I think that it's good for people to read books about him. I really do. They need to know that there's evil out there, and that they definitely can control it. I had learned to fight for my life long before Bundy had ever opened my bedroom door. In the fall of '76, I had enrolled at FSU in Tallahassee and pledged Chi Omega after being recommended for admission by my high school pal, Susie White. As a freshman, we lived in an all-girls dormitory, but my parents had convinced me to move into the sorority house for my sophomore year. It had a house mother and combination locks on the doors. My parents said that I would be safer there, so they thought. That December, me and my mom had spent hours shopping for new bedding and decorated the room in shades of white and green. During this time, my roommate, who was a junior named Karen Chandler, took equal care of both sides of the room, and were proud of the result. We had kept a little trunk between the beds, which housed books, a lamp, and my glasses. Chandler had hung plants in holders from the curtain rod, and we had never closed the curtains. Our windows had faced the back of the sorority, and since they were on the second floor, we both felt safe leaving the windows uncovered. I really did like how the sunlight was always pouring in. January 14th, 1978 was a Saturday, and that morning I had dressed with care to attend a wedding at nearby Wesley Chapel. I'd been attending the little church since my freshman year, and even dated a boy who was named David. From the congregation, mind you. The bride was a nursing student, and a really good friend of mine. After the reception was over, I went back to Chi Omega, changed into my pajamas, which was a yellow flannel nightgown that I had just gotten for Christmas, and I decided to study in bed. I read quietly on the other side of the room. Around 10:30 p.m., my roommate had turned off their light and decided that they would go to sleep. Around 3 a.m., our bedroom door had creaked open. A dark figure had crept in and tripped over the little trunk between the beds. I suddenly had woken up. I remember that noise of the trip, and something was falling off the trunk, and that had woke me up. The room was dark, and I didn't have my glasses on, but I remember seeing a black mass. I couldn't even see that it was a person. I saw the club, saw him lift it over his head, and then slam it on me. The first time it didn't hurt. It was just pressure, like something pressing on your arm. and then he had hit me again. And I think that's where he hit me in the face and broke my jaw in 3 places, and then suddenly I had passed out. But that's what I remember the most. Him lifting the club and bringing it right down on me. The room was so small that Bundy basically was able to hit my roommate with one side of the club, spin around, and then hit me with the other side. But before he could bring down a death blow on either one of us, our bedroom door was flooded with light. Outside of our back door, a sorority sister, named Nita, was getting out of her boyfriend's car after a late date. Because we never had closed our curtains, the car headlights were shining straight into our bedroom. I had saw the light. It was like God's light. I remember thinking, oh my God, something cleared the room. Bundy had raced downstairs. I guess that he thought that he was seen. In fact, he was seen. The girl getting out of her car had spotted his distinctive profile, thin lips, sharp nose, and would later provide the only eyewitness testimony at his trial. While she was telling another sister what she had seen, they saw me stumbling out of my room, covered in blood. When they had moved to help me, they saw my roommate sitting up in bed, rocking and moaning. Before long, paramedics were bending over me, telling me that I had been shot in the face. I tried to scream, but with a shattered jaw, a torn right cheek, and a tongue almost bitten in half, I couldn't make a single sound. The paramedics had lifted me into a gurney and took me down the wooden stairs. I saw all the faces of the sorority sisters crowding above me. Outside, the air was full of flashing police lights. I was freezing and confused. The scene looked like some sort of carnival. In the emergency room, the doctors had cut off my Christmas gown and stared down at my underwear, confused. I heard them wonder out loud if they should give me a rape kit examination, a thought that filled me with terror. But then I noticed a familiar face in the crowd of doctors. It was the bride from that morning, working a training shift at the ER on her wedding night. I had heard her say, with such a brutal attack, what are the chances that he would put her underwear back on? My friend had stroked my hair, and for the first time that night, I had felt my fear drain away from me. After spending a week in the hospital with my jaw wired shut and a guard at the door at all times, the police had led me back to Chi Omega so that I could tell them if my attacker had anything from her room. At my door, they lifted the yellow crime scene tape so that I could look and duck under it. There was blood splattered all over the wall. My green and white bedspread was covered with it. It was all over the place, on the walls and everything. That really stays in your mind. I can see it right now as I'm typing this. I spent the next few months healing at my parents' home in Miami, as undercover cops had kept watch across the street from me. I had met with an oral surgeon, who had to re-break my jaw, realign it, and wire it shut once again. Bundy was caught on February 15th. His name meant nothing to me, as I hadn't been following the murders out west. And his face didn't ring a bell either, since I technically didn't see it when he was looming over me. For the next 9 weeks, I ate only what I could slurp through with my teeth. Even though I was surrounded by my family, I was desperate to hear from my sisters, but no one was returning my phone calls. This was my first taste of loneliness, especially as a Bundy victim in a world of news about him. I had survived a brush with one of the most dangerous men in the country, and yet in some ways, I was on my own. The cameras had swarmed around him, and the world was moving on. I hadn't been around any of my sorority sisters since that attack, and they're all moving forward, and here I am, stuck in a bubble. In the meantime, Bundy groupies were showing up at his courtroom appearances, swooning every time the killer grinned at any one of them. I may have been small, but I definitely was fierce. The newspapers later would call me a belligerent survivor. 3 months later, I took a job as a cashier at a lumber yard to overcome my fear of strange men. I was also planning a wedding. My boyfriend had proposed right after that attack, and our families had loved the idea, as marriage seemed like the perfect way to keep me safe. I was married in June in a long-sleeved, high-neck dress that my parents had picked out for me. Right after the wedding, I took a job as a bank teller, where I was promptly robbed at gunpoint by an attractive male stranger. I had took my afternoon off, and then returned the very next day. During the springtime, the Chi Omega murder trial was moved to Miami, since no judge could be found in Tallahassee. When the day came for me to testify, I walked up to the witness stand and saw Bundy staring at me from the defense table, holding his chin in a casual gesture that would become his courtroom trademark. The look that he gave me wasn't intimidating, or furious, or pleading. It was just emotionless. He was just staring me down. I wasn't scared at all. I wasn't angry, so much as a throwing up feeling. It was bad. It was disgust towards him. I answered every single question, looking straight at him. After the prosecutor had finished, the defense only had one question for me. Did you see him in your room? I was forced to reply that I had only seen a shadow. It was a frustrating moment for me, but that didn't save him at all. On the 24th of July, he was found guilty finally, and a week later sentenced to death by the electric chair. I had moved forward alone. In 1980, I had returned to Chi Omega House, walked up that curving wooden staircase, full of dread. As I had climbed, I would almost see myself coming down the stairs on the gurney. I passed Margaret's room and Lisa's room, two of Bundy's victims, and then I turned into the room that used to be mine. I expected to see the blood all over the wall, and my dirty linens, bloody and crimson. Nothing was the same. I took a deep breath, I turned around, and I was so glad when I did it. My marriage was breaking down by this point, but at the end of 1980, we both had got miraculous news. I was pregnant. When my son was 2 years old, me and my husband filed for divorce. 4 years later, I began dating Scott, one of my theater friends from high school. He was the only person with me on the night of the 23rd, which was Ted Bundy's last night on Earth. I would say it was the Floridian event of the decade, drawing more TV cameras than the Pope's visit 2 years earlier. But we both had sat through it alone. When the district attorney had called me to tell me that Bundy was dead, I began wailing and rocking back and forth, as a friend of mine had tried to hold me. Margaret and Lisa were flashing through my mind. As I had cried, I felt something change in me. All the angst, it was lifting. I felt so clean after that. I got dressed and went to breakfast. And then I went shopping for a new car, and I stopped for lunch. It was just a normal day. I didn't want him to have any more influence on me. In many ways, I have moved on from Bundy. Some days, I'm not even into the true crime bookstore bit all that much anymore. At the end of the day, I think I was a bigger part of his life than he was of mine. I believe that my life is so much more than the tale of a girl who survived a serial killer, no matter how many times my name appears next to Bundy's books. I'm still very, very much the same person as I was in high school. So much of me has not changed as a result of the attack, which is what I find to be really amazing. My roles are many: mother, actress, lumberyard cashier, bank teller, wife. It has all made me stronger, and it gave me more to live for, and it taught me nobody's going to put me down. Yes, that night happened, but though the rest of the world might read about it obsessively, I read it as just one night of my life, a very dark night, but also the night where light had poured in through the window and drove the darkness away. So I'd walked into the room for the first time freshman year and saw him standing in the middle of the room screaming at his dad. He was yelling about not wanting to go and how he blamed his mom for writing his college essay, about filing the application. He kept calling my roommate, I'll just name him Eduardo, as ungrateful and a piece of shit, threatening to beat the shit out of him if he even tried to leave. It was right after he finished speaking that they realized I was in the room. They both had pretended nothing had happened, shook my hand, and introduced themselves. Luckily, my parents had not walked in with me, so they didn't have to see what I had to see. Yes, eventually my parents had met his, as they helped me set up the room, and talked about how proud of us they were. His dad kept saying things like, it's either college or the streets, because I'm not paying to support a failure. My parents, of course, thought that he was just joking. Every day this kid told me how he just hated school. He would never go to class. He would drink in the room all day with the door wide open. We were on a dry campus, by the way. He would scream at everyone, party all night, and just be a dick. He used to watch VH1 every night until about 4 a.m., with the volume cranked up so loud that you couldn't hear yourself. When I asked him to turn it down because I couldn't hear, he said he would if I wrestled him. Turns out he was really serious about this. He wanted to wrestle me. Because of me asking him to turn down that Bret Michaels Rock of Love show, I declined, and I just went to bed. The next day he called his mom to come get him, and she agreed, said that she was getting in the car. She never came. He lost his shit. He broke everything that he owned, punched a hole through his TV, slammed his Guitar Hero controller on the ground repeatedly, threw his Xbox right out the window, cracked his cell phone in half, ripped his bed sheets. He basically totaled his side of the room. I left the room during all of this, assuming that he was just blowing off some steam and not knowing he was breaking his shit. I had walked back into a war zone, with him standing in the middle of the room, just crying, drinking laundry detergent, yelling about how he just wanted to die, how he took a whole bottle of Advil after he broke his stuff. I ran to go get the RA. He ran and took the broken glass and plastic shards from his computer monitor, started cutting his wrists. The RA and I entered the room to this kid throwing up detergent and bleeding all over the place. Cops were called. They fed him charcoal to prevent him from dying due to the detergent and the pills. Apparently they do this instead of the Ipecac syrup. He left that night, woke me up to say goodbye. The last thing he said to me was, "Goodbye. I'm sorry about ruining your birthday." After he left, I needed a new roommate. The guys across the hall were triple in the room, made for two, so I had invited one of them to come live with me. He had accepted. They already agreed, and less than 2 weeks later, he was all moved in with me. This new guy is great. We really hit it off, became fast friends. He begins to tell me about how Eduardo still texts him. Apparently he still texted everyone in the rooms near me. Now I really don't care. Because, well, who am I to say who they should and shouldn't talk to, as long as it really doesn't involve me? My new roommate, who I'll call Bill, is a pretty social guy, and has long since made friends with all of the neighbors. I always wanted to make friends with the people around us, but having Eduardo as a roommate made it incredibly difficult to do so. His train of thought was, if they were his friends, under no circumstances would they be my friend as well. Honestly, looking back at it, I guess I was a bit like an abused girlfriend, or a wife. I'd gotten so used to him being a dick that I just quietly sat in my room playing video games, afraid to even be sociable for fear of awakening the beast. Anyways, Bill introduced me to all the neighbors. We all became really good friends. And it was once this friendship had blossomed that they began to admit to me that not only was Eduardo still texting them, he was becoming more and more angry towards me. He would text them about things, and how he would be better if I had left and not him, and how he just made some mistakes and wished that he would come back. It was at this point that he texted Bill and told him, "Hey man, I'm going to come visit for the weekend. I'm taking my old bed while I'm there." It was at this point that I actually nutted up and decided enough was enough. I called him up myself. I still had his number saved in my phone for God knows what reason. Flat out told him that he was unwelcomed in my room. I said that he was welcome to come get his stuff that he had left, that had survived his episode, which was his mini fridge. It was really all that remained, but there was no way that I was letting him stay in the room for longer than it took to take his fridge, because of the fact that he was downright a horrible person. He flipped out on me. He started screaming into the phone how I was the greasiest piece of shit slimeball that he had ever called a friend. I said sorry, but goodbye, and I hung up on him. He tried calling me back, texting, and IMing me, but I just ignored him, or I even blocked him. It was at this point that he started commenting on everything that I've ever done on Facebook. I mean ever. All with the same word. He called me the F word. Hundreds of notifications. Finally he stopped. I thought that it was over. Then suddenly Bill gets a text that says, "Dude, fuck him. He won't say no after this." Bill asks him what he means, and he responds with, "Got my dad's gun case keys. See you in an hour, dude." I've never run anywhere faster than I have to the police station that very day. I explained the situation. They called the cops from his area to speak with him and his parents. They assured me that nothing was going to happen, and that he probably was just pissed off and needed to blow off some steam. Turns out the cops got to his house as he was getting in the car. He had his dad's shotgun under the passenger seat. I called my family. They drove out. We had a meeting with the police. His mother drove out to the school too and met with us. She pleaded that her son needed help, and that if I had him arrested, he could never change. My parents kept urging me to press charges on him, but the look in his mom's eyes was so sad that I told her I wouldn't if he ended up getting the help that he needed. And once again, everything was fine for about a week. Halloween night rolls around. Due to my job on campus, I can't go out partying. My job consists of sitting at a desk, checking ID cards between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. to make sure everyone who enters actually lives in the building. Well, I was informed that joining me and my work partner would be 2 troopers. They told me that it was because the drunken shenanigans on Halloween tend to get more rowdy than 2 minimum wage student workers can really handle. I thought that was pretty badass. I spent the whole night checking the IDs of kids dressed up in costumes, trashed out of their skulls. Right around 3 a.m., one officer pulls me aside, says that he has to tell me something. The real reason that they were there that night was because that Eduardo was seen in the area. They needed to make sure that I was safe while they found him. Apparently kids are harder to identify when they're all costumed up. The officer told me that they found him on campus around 2 a.m., hiding in the service entrance of my dorm building. He was carrying a knife. This time, I wasn't so lenient on him. I pressed charges. Among other things, he is now not allowed within 2 miles of campus, which essentially makes him unable to be in the town the school is located in. It's been about 4 years now, and I still remember every detail vividly. I was on OkCupid for 2 years. Had over 100 messages, and about 30 dates, 2 of which became relationships. One of them I am still currently in. It was a dry month, mostly one-liner messages asking, "How many fingers do you use when you masturbate?" Or "You seem cool, I want to talk more, DTF." And then one guy, Alex, asked me about my degree and how he was also pursuing higher education and worked on a thesis. That got the ball rolling. So we had a very nice conversation for days where each of us would respond to the message, make a few comments, maybe tell a story, and then ask another question or 2. Honestly, the best conversationalist that I've come across. We agreed to meet at a Starbucks. I got there, ordered, paid, and then sat down. He arrives a little bit late, has to wait in line, and we sort of steal glances every once in a while as he waits. Then once he sits down, we both agreed how nice it was to finally meet. He says next time I'll just give you a different time to come so I can be here to buy your drink. I said that's very nice of you, but it's really no problem. You don't have to buy me anything. To which he turns his whole body to face me, puts his elbows on the table, and then says, thank you. You know, that's a great outlook on life, and that's something that I'm really looking for in a woman. Because, you know, I dated this girl who I met at some macaroon place. And you know what they charge for macaroons these days? $3. 3. So I ordered 2. She orders 3, and a drink. I took out my wallet, and was just $1 short, so I asked if she would cover that. And would you believe it? She did not have a dime on her. Then a few moments later, we talk about OkCupid. The macaroon girl was also off OKC. And our weirdest dates and most random messages that we had. And this was the very moment that he said, you know, I've had 9 dates in 2 weeks from my new method. Get ready, because I'm going to tell you the method for getting you girls in the chair. It starts with messaging. You always respond to a specific, add a story, then ask a question, in that order. Then you say that you'll meet somewhere for something quick, like a drink or a cafe. Then you drop the bomb that you're the total package. You're the man, you're in the zone, and that they can't do anything but agree because it worked. It totally worked, I mean. Here you are in the chair, and here I am on date number 10. Then for the next 2 hours explained to me just how great he was at getting women in the chair, but had no desire to be in a relationship. He was just a serial dater because it would be too much work, and that he was too considerate of the woman who he would be leading on with hopes of being official, or growing past dates and open hookups. So I remember the first time that I was online on tour, almost giddy from excitement of exploring the unknown. I navigated to the hidden wiki page with its extensive link catalog. I visited some online gun and drug stores, and then called it a day. Exciting, but nothing out of the ordinary. But things got messy the very next time that I opened up Tor. I came upon an anonymous chat site that anyone could use by signing up. The guys there seemed really nice. I told them that I was new to the whole Tor thing, and they took their time to explain to me the basics and how everything worked around the network. "Take it easy," one of them typed back. "So what are you looking for?" "I've been hearing stories about the dark web, so I came to check out what the deal was. But it's all pretty mellow," I responded back. I guess I was expecting some surprises, but drugs and guns are all that are here. I had given my honest opinion to him. "You're a nice chap. If you like surprises, follow this link," and then he typed, and he signed out. The link took me to a private forum, sort of like Reddit, but more basic. The first thread was an extensive discussion on how to make cocaine from locally available substances. It also talked about different other unconventional types of highs, like injecting yourself with a mixture of Clorox and ground sugar. A user reported that the high was so potent, 12 hours later, he was still feeling it. Another thread discussed the best ways to have sex with your pets. As gross as it was, the users also posted links to porn sites that had human-animal sex. I'd been looking around for a couple of days when I came across an innocuous-looking link sitting quietly at the comments section, with the subject line, NSFW. At this point, I had already seen a woman have sex with a horse, so there really wasn't much that could surprise me, or so I had thought. The link took me to a video feed of a girl sitting in a chair with a countdown clock running at 11 minutes to 0. The girl looked sleepy, possibly drugged up, and she looked right at the camera, eyes half open. I had no idea what was going on. The website was minimalist, just a comment bar and no other frills. I tried typing something, but the website told me that I was a guest, and to leave a comment I had to sign up and pay $50. 5 minutes to 0, a man entered the room, started hustling furniture around. The comment section suddenly fired up. There was about 50 other users that were signed in, and they were all leaving obscene comments. The man came near the monitor, seemed to read something from it, smirked, and then he went back. It suddenly dawned on me that perhaps this was a live feed. As the countdown clock counted down to 0, Beethoven's Ode to Joy began to play in the background. The man came back on screen, this time with a Swiss Army knife. The comment section, in the meantime, was bustling with perverse comments. "Tear her shirt down," somebody had wrote. And in a moment, I saw the man slash through the girl's shirt, making her partially topless. "Spit down her throat," someone else wrote, and the man did so. Suddenly, the quantum of the incident dawned on me. There was this girl who was being tortured live for the viewing pleasure of a bunch of sick human beings. I almost felt like throwing up at that time. "Hit her ribs with a bat," was the next request. I watched in horror as the man pulled out a baseball bat from underneath the table, swinging it for her right chest, meanwhile toppling her over by sheer force of the hit. The girl howled in pain as the commenters typed in there, "Haha, and loved it." "She's got a perfect nose, let's break it," someone had typed in. "What happened to waterboarding her?" another one had typed. A chill had ran through my spine. Somewhere was this girl locked away in a dungeon, possibly abducted from her family, and to be tortured on a live stream, and ultimately be killed at the end of the show. I closed all connections. My hands were still trembling as I proceeded to shut down my PC and take a walk to go get some fresh air. It remains to be one of the most unpleasant memories that I have. I can still hear her scream in my head as I type this sentence. I still have Tor on my computer, but I don't use the service anymore. I just figured that I was happy without it. We met in a group in undergrad. We became friends. Slowly we became much closer. Developed a crush on him. We started hanging out more on our own. One night after some drinks, it escalated into some kissing and then cuddling. I messaged him later, letting him know that while I enjoyed what happened, I didn't think that it was a good idea for us to keep it up, as I had feelings for him, and wasn't really interested in a friends with benefits kind of setup. He told me that he kind of had feelings as well, that it might be nice to see how our relationship actually developed. We did. We started dating, dinners, movies, all the physical stuff that comes with a relationship. When he was briefly hospitalized, I spent every single night there with him. I opened up to him over time, told him about my history of sexual abuse, family history of substance abuse. He opened up about his history of being used by his exes, how they were all horrible and had treated him horribly, how he's just been so nice that everyone takes advantage of him, that all he wants is to find a nice girl who will love him for who he is and that he can treat like a princess. One night, we were probably about 4 or 5 months in. We're laying in bed together, watching a movie. I started telling him about a funny conversation that I had at work. So then I was saying, my boyfriend and I feel him stiffen up, and he kind of awkwardly says, "You know, we're not dating, right? Like, I thought we just had a fun thing going on." So apparently we're friends with benefits. The exact thing that I told him that I didn't want. I asked him if we could just start dating then. He said he was just too busy for an actual relationship, even though we were basically in one. I told him that I was really hurt, felt used, that I wasn't interested in being anything more than acquaintances in the future. After that, I slowly started seeing someone, a guy who was actually pretty great, had actively pursued me. And guy number 1 flipped out. Apparently, even though he didn't want to be in a relationship with me, I wasn't allowed to be with anyone else. For months afterwards, he spent most of his time bad-mouthing me to whomever would listen, talking about how I just used him, how I'm just like every single slut who thinks that she's too good for everyone, how he had treated me so well, and I had ripped his heart out. The worst part, though, was that he told numerous individuals and groups of people all about my personal history. Apparently a couple of times, after a couple of drinks, he'd even start to cast doubt on it, comparing what I did to him to my past abuse, stating that it was surprising to him that an alleged abuse victim would rape the feelings of innocent men. We no longer speak. I still hear about things that he said about me a couple of times a year. It really made me wonder about all those terrible exes that he had, and made me put more faith than ever into the thought that the way people talk to you about others is the same way that they'll talk to others about you. What a nice guy, right? I have a client who hits on me. He knows that I am married because he mentions it all the time. He also lashes out verbally if I say things that he doesn't like, which is truly scary. He's 55 and older, never moved out of his parents' house, spends his mother's money for everything. She's in her 80s and works 2 jobs to pay for his toys. One day, she came with him to see if there was anything that we could do to get his bills lower since she is struggling, and he starts lashing out at her. "Shut the fuck up. She isn't talking to you. You're stupid. Shut up." I felt honestly worried for his mother. Anyways, he would always purposely let his insurance lapse, just so that he would have an excuse to come in and sign a form so that he could talk to me. He was very blatant about it all. He always threw his mom under the bus for not paying his bills, but then would talk about how he bought this or that. And then he would say, "I knew that I should have paid that insurance, but I just couldn't pass up a chance to come say hi to you." One time he said that he couldn't come in until Saturday to sign the form, asked if I could make arrangements to be there on the weekend instead. I told him that we were closed. My coworker, an elderly man of 60 plus, said that he would be there if I had the forms ready. The guy got angry, said that he wanted me to be there on Saturday, alone, and that I should cancel my plans and be here no matter what. My mind got stuck on the alone part. I told him that I couldn't do it, but I would be back on Monday with a full staff, just in case. One day he called to use his mom's credit card to pay his bill. I didn't answer the phone right away because I had another client with me. He keeps calling over and over again. Finally, after the client left, I picked up the phone. He started yelling at me immediately. I asked him why he was so upset. He said that I couldn't get on the phone to pay my bill, so I used the money to buy my baseball cards. "This is your fault," then slammed the phone down on me. Just this past month, his vehicle is broken down, so he had to go buy another one. His mom went with him. He had insufficient credit for it, so his mom had to buy it under her name. I told them that I could not add the vehicle to the policy since the vehicle was not titled to him. We would have to cancel the policy, and she would need to put it on her insurance plan, which would be with a different agency. Finally, I would be free of him. Until he came in last week to sign the cancellation form, a document that is time-stamped. When he arrived, I didn't have the form already printed out, and he went off on me right then and there. "You should have had this form ready for me," and then claimed that I was being incompetent. I told him that it was a time-stamped form, and that the document is not generated until the client is sitting in front of me and ready to cancel, because it has to be signed at that very moment. He signed the form, then he stomped off. I felt relief that I wouldn't have to deal with him anymore, until he came back in the door, and then said, "By the way, let me know when you break it off with your husband. I might have to come back and get insurance from you once again." During all of this, I let my husband know everything, just in case something did happen. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.